Everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a massive 13-game baseball slate for you. This is a really good slate. I have not liked some of the bigger slates lately, but this one is just fantastic. We have great pitching options. Actually, too many probably. We have great options pretty much at every position. I think shortstop is the weakest one today. With that said, though, before I get started, can you guys smack that subscribe button and hit the like button? It really does help the channel a lot. Also, share it on social media if you don't mind. With that said, though, let's get into the slate here. We have a very interesting one. As I told you, I do have some core plays for DraftKings. I have Blake Savall, Eloy Jimenez, and Ronald Acuna Jr. Now, I will preface and say that I really had trouble deciding if I should even use any core plays today on this video because there's just so many good options across the slate. I have not seen a slate this deep in a while. So let's get into pitchers first. So we're going to have some good P1 options today. We have 5 guys that are P1 options. 3 of them are great plays. 2 of them are contrarian, or one of them is a contrarian and one's a Hail Mary. So my top 3 are Ohtani, Valdez, and Webb. And then my 2 contrarian plays are Castillo and Clayton Kershaw here. Overall, I think that Ohtani, Valdez, and Webb, one of those guys should probably be in your lineup, and all 3 of them have different upsides depending on their matchups, but they all have viability here and top-tier potential. As for Costello and Kershaw, these 2 both have some good upside, but they're in really tough matchups, and so they're kind of contrarian plays today. Moving into the P2 options, we have 3 good P2 options in Zach Wheeler, Bailey Ober, and Tyler Glasnow here. And they all have kind of decent matchups, but a little bit tough. And then I have some contrarian options in Merrill Kelly, Chris Bassett, Charlie Morton, and John Gray, who are all in kind of tough matchups, but have some upside as a result. And then I have 2 Hail Mary P2, or sorry, just one P2 Hail Mary option, which is Justin Verlander, who has a very tough matchup here against Toronto. So overall, I do think this is a pretty good slate for pitching, as there's lots of viable options. So it's going to be hard to figure out which guys you want to use the best. But overall, I do think Ohtani, Valdez, and Webb, one of those 3 probably have to be at the top of your lineup, and there's going to be the most chalky options on the slate. Moving into our catchers here. Before I get into catchers, actually, I did want to note some weather for this slate. The Tampa Bay Boston game has a low possibility of being canceled today, but it may get a significant delay, so do keep that in mind. And then the Toronto, New York Mets, Cleveland, Minnesota, and Colorado, Kansas City game all have possible delays, but they all should play, and so do keep that in mind when you're making your lineups today. With that said, we're going to look at our catchers here. We're going to start with Alvarez for the New York Mets. Now, he draws some nice potential here. He's hitting the ball pretty well, and he has home run potential, but he is kind of a boom or bust play from that perspective. I do think he's priced pretty fairly, though, and he draws a really good matchup. Sabal, though, is the guy I like the most. He has some really good upside. He's hitting the ball really well. He has home run potential, and I like his upside in this particular matchup. Probably a little bit better than Alvarez, but it was kind of a toss-up between the 2. But with San Francisco being kind of in a better situation, I think he probably draws some slight better upside. Then we'll look at Patrick Bailey for the Giants as well, who hasn't played in a ton of games, but when he has played, he's been doing some fireworks, so I do like his potential, though he does strike out a lot. He still has a good batting average, and so while he's hitting the ball well, he's definitely somebody in consideration, and he has home run potential here if he draws a start. Grandal for the White Sox is also in play, though he is somewhat high risk here today. He definitely draws some utility as a good value play as well, though he does feel riskier than some of the others. And then if you want to pay up for a guy today at this position, Salvador Perez for Kansas City is in the best situation, as he's got really good home run potential. He's hitting the ball pretty well, and he has nice upside, though his price is fairly expensive. You could also consider Sean Murphy, Will Smith, and JT Realmuto here. Overall, catcher, is got plenty of cheap plays, as well as some decent expensive plays that feel like it just feels like a very deep position today, more so than most days. Looking at first baseman, we have a lot of good options here. Paul Goldschmidt is leading off with St. Louis as a top-tier option. He has home run potential every time he comes up to bat, though he hasn't had as many this season as we kind of expected him to have at this point. The metrics are good, and he's got a great matchup here. Matt Olson is a good alternative to him, and arguably in a better situation, and he's also hit more home runs, but the batting average has been a lot worse than Goldschmidt. But that said, his power is really big for this game. He has nice potential and has great upside. Then we're going to look at Vinny Pasquantino. Excuse me about that. Vinny Pasquantino for Kansas City. He has some really good metrics for this matchup. He has been up and down throughout the season when it comes to being viable for fantasy, but he is leading into that viability again, and he's got home run metrics for this particular matchup. I also like Lamont Wade Jr. If you go with the San Francisco stack, he's definitely somebody to plug in with that kind of stack, as he draws really good metrics for this matchup. I also like Andrew Vaughn here. If he similar, if you go with a Chicago White Sox stack, which is definitely viable today, he would definitely be somebody in consideration with his good hitting lately. You could also consider Pete Alonso, Dan Vogelbach, Josh Naylor, Justin Turner, Nate Lowe, and Brendan Donovan at this position. It's a very deep position overall for space, and there's plenty of good options in all price ranges, and you kind of want to go with whatever team you're probably going to stack as your core first baseman today. Moving to second base, we're looking at Brandon Lowe first. Now, I did consider looking at him deeper due to the fact that he is starting to hit the ball pretty well the last few games, and he's had home run potential, and he's been starting to finally raise that batting average out of the gutter from where he started the season. I really like his upside in this matchup. He has home run potential, and he draws a great opportunity for a good game. Then we'll look at Polanco for the Minnesota Twins. Now, he has hit the ball really well so far this season, and he doesn't have the home run potential some other guys have, but he's hitting well, and I like his potential here for a home run with the matchup metrics that are available here. Nolan Gorman is also in play here for St. Louis. He's hitting the ball really solidly, though he has been in a little bit of a slump. He definitely draws some nice metrics for this matchup, though his price is not appealing here at all. And then Romy Gonzalez for Chicago White Sox. Now, he has some Hail Mary potential here as high risk, high reward, but he's had 3 home runs in 3 of the last 4 games he's played, and I do think he draws some good metrics here, but he is high risk as a result of the situation. Also consider Jose Altuve, Gleyber Torres, and Colton Wong here. There's not a ton of value at this position, but everyone does feel pretty priced fairly other than Gorman. And if you choose to go with value, you just have to realize that's a high-risk proposition. Moving into third base, we're going to look at Rafael Devers, who draws really good metrics for this matchup, though it is a high-risk matchup, and it's not as good as some of the other games he's had recently, but he hasn't hit a home run in a while, and he has good home run potential, though, especially late in the game. Royce Lewis for Minnesota has played 3 games, and he's had 3 very solid games, including 2 home runs. As long as he's got those metrics rolling for him, he draws some interest here on DraftKings, especially at this price. He has some nice utility here as a good cheap option at this position. He can also play shortstop as well. Austin Riley is a good alternative to Devers, as he's priced pretty cheap compared to Devers, and he's been hitting the ball pretty well lately. He's had some better games, and he has home run potential, so I like his upside here. And Atlanta is a decent stack, but they are hard to stack due to their prices. And then we'll look at J.D. Davis for San Francisco, who is just too cheap for his potential here. He has really good metrics for this matchup. I expect him to be more expensive, and he's hit the ball really well, so I like his upside here. Also consider Ryan McMahon, Jose Ramirez, and Nolan Arenado here. Overall, third base has good options, both expensive and cheap. There's not a ton in the middle, in the 4,500 range, but you can feel comfortable either way going cheap or expensive on this particular position. Moving into the shortstops, this position is going to start with Tim Anderson, who draws really good metrics here, and he's underpriced. He hasn't hit a home run this season. He also hasn't had too many stolen bases yet. But he does have the potential, and he has good games under his belt. And if he can get on base, he can make things happen. So I do like his upside here in this good matchup, and his price is fair. Bobby Witt Jr. is in play, though he's higher risk, high reward due to his price and his batting average. Though he does have tendency to have big games, and he's had a couple of those recently. He has nice metrics for the situation. Royce Lewis is also in play here. Xander Bogaerts can also play at this position, and he has some really good metrics for this matchup, though he is fairly expensive, and he doesn't feel as good of a play as Tim Anderson and some others. Brandon Crawford, though, is a good value play here. Now, it's not very often that he draws great metrics for a particular game, but he definitely does in this case, and he's had some good games lately, so I do like his upside and potential here. Also consider Bo Bichette, Corey Seager, and Trey Turner at this position. For shortstop, this position feels pretty weak today. Despite having some good options, it's probably the weakest position for fantasy upside on the entire slate. That makes me think that it's better to go cheaper. However, with Tim Anderson being $4,600, that definitely makes it a little bit harder to do that. Looking in the outfielders, we're going to start with our top plays, and we have Bryce Harper, Ronald Acuna, Robert Jr., Soto, and Corbin Carroll. Those 5 guys all have massive home run potential today. I really like all their upsides, and I think that they're definitely top tier options on the slate. So if if you're looking for a stack and you want to stack one of those teams, Philly, Atlanta, Chicago White Sox, San Diego, Arizona, it would definitely be a guy from that group that I would probably throw into the lineup if I can afford to. Moving into the value plays at this position, we'll start with the Benintendis of the world. Benintendi has really good utility here, though he's not hit a home run yet this season. He does draw good metrics and good utility as a good hitter, mostly able to score some fantasy points occasionally in certain matchups. This is definitely one of those matchups, so I definitely think he draws some situational positive upside. Looking at Eloy Jimenez here, he has some really good metrics here. He's starting to hit the ball really well as well. Hitting extremely well lately. I don't think he's missed a hit since last month, so I like his upside. Though he hadn't played a ton of games, he definitely draws some great utility metrics here as a good core play. Ronald Acuna obviously is a core play as well. Gavin Sheets is in play here for Chicago White Sox as well. He definitely has games where he has really great metrics, and this is one of them. He has some run potential here, and he draws a nice situation if he draws a start. Lars Nootbaar is in play if he plays, which I don't know if he's going to play today or not, but if he does, he'll be in play as a good position player, as a good value play at this position, and has some nice metrics here. Jack Sawinski for Pittsburgh has hit the ball pretty solidly so far this season. The batting average hasn't been ideal, but he has home run potential, and he is one of the better players on Pittsburgh all year, and he's got a really good matchup here. And then we'll look at Michael Harris Jr. Now, Michael Harris has had a up and down season. He had a couple really good games lately, and that's giving him some upside, but he's still striking out a lot. But if he can get on base, he can get stolen bases. He is definitely a high-risk play today, but he is interesting. Blake Sabal, who is a core play for me today, can also play in the outfield if you want. If you want to go with a different catcher, he can play there in outfield too. Brandon Nimmo is in play for the Mets. Now, the matchup here is not super ideal, but the metrics here are really good, even though he's not a big home run guy. And then Yastrzemski for San Francisco, he draws some really good metrics for this matchup. I like his upside. He's hitting the ball really well lately, and he has home run potential. And then last but not least, Jeff McNeil, who can play second base or outfield. He draws some really good metrics for this matchup. But with second base being so deep, he's definitely more viable in an outfield. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. And have a nice day, guys.